All right, welcome to another show. This is obviously it's a public holiday weekend. Unfortunately, I didn't see you face to face, which is oh okay, it's not that great. Please, when I say that, because obviously next week we do have another pre-recorded week, and I'm just a little concerned around the formative three, right? So I would like to brief you, and I'm just going to contact you directly, obviously through the WhatsApp group, and just organize the time. I know I should rather record it as well, but I'd like to go through it face to face. We'll organize a time and then so that there are any and all questions, right, are understood by you. Just as a disclaimer, hope you have a great week otherwise, right? H Radio 223 part-timers. We are continuing with news today, part 8 of 12, compiling news, sports, traffic, and weather. Beyond Powerful Radio is the reference, chapter 25, multi-version news, page 283 to 296. What's going to happen in this particular lesson? It's quite short, right? In terms of content, right? You'll see that it's only a couple of slides long, but the thing is that we're going to, in slide two, right, listen to three different newscasts, right, from three different stations, and we're going to just have a kind of a quick post analysis on each one, so you know what it sounds like. I know you know what it sounds like when it comes to news. I know that you've listened to stations in your life, and I know you've watched news, listened to news, read news, all the type of stuff, right? But we are going to listen to radio news being broadcast. And once again, kind of like not crit I would say, but just kind of maybe reflect on what was done that could stand out or should stand out for you as you are learning and applying yourself to becoming also well, I'd say a learned, right, newscaster yourself. When we are, just as a throw forward to multi-version news, it is us okay, so let me kind of explain it practically as to how multi-news works, right? We're going to have one story, for example, right? And one story has many different angles. And think of it from a perspective of a newscaster that goes on air and is doing obviously a show alongside a jock for, let's say, 3 hours, right? So let's say every single half hour, well, not half hour, I would say every hour, at the top of the hour with the bulletin, the story should be updated. In other words, we could use a different angle. Obviously, updated with new information. We don't move away from the core of what the story is about, but we can shed more light and information, angles, etc. Right, by taking a very like a trending news story, but for lack of a better word, but a trending news story and giving more information to the listener as we move along with each bulletin that happens. The reason why I say every hour is, as you know, every half hour, we at the bottom of the hour we reach news headlines, right? And there could be a small update, I suppose, in that headline, but again, it's throw forward to the top of the hour, right? So without further ado, I have obviously shared the sound. You'll be able to hear it, and let's listen to the first one, which I think is Eyewitness News.
This is Eyewitness News.
Good morning, I'm Tara Penny. We start with the latest from Afghanistan. Reuters is reporting that 5 people were killed in the chaos at Kabul airport this morning as U.S. troops guarded the evacuation of embassy staff just a day after the Taliban seized the capital. It's not immediately clear how the victims died. A U.S. official said troops had fired in the air to deter people trying to force their way onto a military flight that was set to take U.S. diplomats and embassy staff out of the fallen city. Frantic scenes broke out overnight as Taliban officials declared the war was over and issued statements aimed at calming the panic that's been building in Kabul as the militants, who ruled from 1996 to 2001, surrendered the US-backed government forces. President Ashraf Ghani fled from the country yesterday as the Islamists entered Kabul virtually unopposed, saying he wanted to avoid bloodshed. Taliban spokesperson Suhail Shaheen said in a message on Twitter their fighters were under strict orders not to harm anyone. It took the Taliban just over a week to seize control of the country after a lightning sweep that ended in Kabul Kabul as government forces, trained for years and equipped by the United States and others at a cost of billions of dollars, melted away. Al Jazeera has broadcast footage of what it said were Taliban commanders in the presidential palace, surrounded by dozens of armed fighters. Back home now, the South African
So just let's quickly analyze that first story. Very comprehensive in terms of obviously EWN News is formatted that way. Tara is, I mean, she's now become quite a legend, a veteran of news casting. I know it's news reading, right? But she's a caster because she is a journalist as well. Her background is not really important, so I'm not going to carry on about Tara, but she is award winning as well. I said I wasn't going to carry on. Okay, I'm not going to carry on. I love Tara, know her personally, and she's really a great professional. Okay, that's enough out of me for Tara. Let's look at how she obviously applies herself. So let's look at the basics, like semantics. The story is well understood because it is short sentences, one fact per sentence, and there is obviously a number of sentences. The actual cast itself was around it's over a minute. So we can again, I said to you before, we kind of look at let's say 30 to 40 seconds in general, right? As a core or foundation for how we're going to, let's say, write our bulletins. But the thing is, again, every single station has its own mutation of what they believe is going to be better for their listeners, right? I quite like a longer news story like this and longer news bulletin because it gets you to a place where you are more informed. And again, with a great newscaster that is reading it, her pace is quite fast if you have to think about it, but it's not. It's just right. So not beyond that line where you just can't follow her at all. So we're listening. So even listening passively, because now we're listening actively. You're literally looking at the screen. You're literally looking or listening with your ears to this actively to be able to process that information. You know, and so that's why you would 10 to 1 have gotten what she said about Al Jazeera, etc., who was obviously involved, the who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? That was covered within the newscast itself. Take obviously note of the leads that we go through within each of these stories and see how they vary and how it obviously does apply to as a great practical application to what you have learned as well. Okay, now I'm not going to stop after every single story. I just want to be able to talk here and there to kind of reflect on what it is that you have already learned about news broadcasting, right? And obviously writing copy and sourcing stories or whatever it may have been, right? And then obviously getting to the presentation itself. Like anything in radio, it's both obviously prep and presentation that does count to make it a good product, right? Not one or the other, but both. Okay. So note the transitions. Everyone would probably take on maybe a generic transition. So moving back home, moving back to South Africa. Like in this case, they started with international news, where we would tell you, okay, start with local news. Again, because we talk about foundation, right? It all is. It's all fine. It's all fine. When I say it's all fine, you need to be able to follow what your news editor is telling you. That's what happens at the end of the day. But if there was any situation where you would have to decide what would sound a bit better, I'd start with the basics because it always works. So let's say obviously local, moving to international, moving back to local, tail enders, etc., etc., etc. Right, let's carry on.
American Medical Association has encouraged medical practitioners to support the country's COVID-19 vaccination campaign. A prominent heart surgeon has landed herself in trouble for her anti-vax views. SAMA has dispelled any doubts about safety and efficacy of these vaccines, stressing jabs have been put through rigorous testing by the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. Kevin Brunt reports.
The South African Medical Association has condemned anti-COVID-19 vaccination sentiments expressed by some healthcare workers. Salma stresses this only fuels vaccine hesitancy. Chairperson Dr. Angelique Kutsia says the benefits of coronavirus vaccines have been scientifically proven.
SAMA cannot support doctors who
I wanna point out about the transitions between segments. I'm saying bits. I'm gonna call them bits because obviously We want to be able to, look at different sections of the newscast itself, right? So now we have obviously we have a Vox, right? So a Vox from a field reporter that then includes a sound bite, so that we can start making sure that we understand the differences. So it's obviously the live report, right, from the anchor, then obviously crossing to, quote unquote, not crossing to because they're not live, right? We're getting obviously the Vox from, once again, the field reporter. Field reporter's report includes a soundbite.
Giving out anti-vaccination sentiment to the patient, which is contrary to the pandemic, to the WHO regulations.
The Netcare Hospital Group has last week dissociated itself from anti-COVID-19 vaccination comments made by renowned heart surgeon Dr. Susan Vosloo. Kevin Brand, Eyewitness News.
The ANC in the Northwest says it will only announce a new premier for the province after meeting and communicating with the relevant structures. Interim Provincial Committee Coordinator Hlomane Chauke has told Eyewitness News no new appointments will be announced today. He also says there's no agreed date for when current Premier Job Mokgoro should step down. Mokgoro and the IPC have been at loggerheads for at least a year now. In April, Eyewitness News revealed that the Provincial Committee had complained to ANC leaders, claiming the Premier ignored party leadership and was running a rogue unit from his office. Last month, the ANC at Luthuli House interviewed 3 potential replacements for Mokgoro. The Premier was brought in 2018 following then Premier and ANC Chair Supremo Pelo's early retirement. Chauke says the IPC will hold a meeting today.
It's only now that we're going to be interacting with the structure, meaning that to communicate the division of the upper structure that comes from the Luthuli House. So we have not yet finalized, and we're not going to be announcing today. We are still busy currently trying to resolve technical matters that will not conclude.
2 suspects are expected to appear in the Palm Ridge Specialized Commercial Crimes Court in connection with multi-million rand tender fraud at the National Health Laboratory Services. Those suspects were arrested yesterday by the Hawks following an investigation into corruption in the procurement of personal protective equipment amounting to 14.4 million rand. The laboratory services have embroiled themselves in tender irregularity scandals following probes by the Special Investigating Unit. Hawk spokesperson Katlego Mogale says the pair, along with a company which has not been named, will be answering to charges relating to the contravention of the Public Finance Management Act.
2 suspects as well as a company are expected to appear in the Palm Ridge Specialized Commercial Crimes Court after they were arrested by the serious corruption investigation of the Hawks. This follows a thorough investigation into the allegation of tender fraud at the National Health Laboratory Services.
And Haitian ambassador to South Africa, Jacques Baril, says international aid agencies in neighboring countries are working to provide support for Haiti in the wake of the latest devastating earthquake. The 7.2 magnitude tremor struck over the weekend, killing more than 1,000 people there. Thousands more are now in urgent need of medical care. The ambassador is warning these numbers are expected to rise over the coming days as rescue operations continue. Prime Minister Ariel Henry has declared a state of emergency and has travelled to affected areas to assess the extent of the damage. He's put out an appeal for assistance in the form of medical supplies. Gold's at $1,773.73 an ounce. The rand's at $14.74 to the dollar, $20.43 to the pound, $17.37 to the euro. Brent crude oil's at $70.31 a barrel.
Heading into the Pretoria CBD, traffic remains a mess. This is coming from Soshanguve. Expect more than a 20-minute delay on the R80 southbound Mabopane Highway from Bremer to Skiam Patlele. Also bumper-to-bumper traffic in Claremont on Bremer Street between the R80 and the Dustport Tunnel. Capital Park, expect more than a 30-minute delay. This is on Paul Kruger from Transnet Avenue all the way to Struan. This is all due to an earlier accident.
A fine day in store for Gauteng, becoming cloudy later on. The temperatures will peak at highs of 18 and 20 degrees. The developing story in Eyewitness News this hour. Reuters is reporting that 5 people were killed in the chaos at Kabul airport in Afghanistan this morning as U.S. troops guarded the evacuation of embassy staff just the day after the Taliban seized the capital.
Eyewitness News.
Right. Okay. So just to note once again, please, Like it's so important. It's of I say of ultimate importance that you get the pronunciation correct. She did it flawlessly, obviously, because I mean she's on commercial radio, even community radio. Really, everyone who is on radio needs to get the names correct, specifically with news. I'm not discounting DJs. DJs need to have the kind of again just kind of the intuition, not the intuition, what do I want to say? Man, what's the word? Anyway, but like they should make a proactive choice to go and do the right thing. In other words, go and learn how people's names are pronounced as people, places, things, whatever it may be, right? So we got that out of us newscast. We got a bit of everything right that has to be in there: the weather, the traffic, obviously the financial indicators, everything that we've taught you to be in there, right, is essential to and you saw that example from I think last well, it was in I think it was in lesson 48, right? Where you saw the example that I wrote up of the newscast, right, itself. Okay, all right, let's listen to another one. And again, I won't crit as much, but let's look at the examples. Or listen, should I say?
The news is brought to you by Capitec. Simplify banking.
I'm sorry, I just need to change this to protected view. Let's have to editable view, so I can actually just change the volume. Thanks for the patience. Sorry. Yeah, better.
The news is brought to you by Capitec. Simplify banking. Live better. Kaya News.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know it was going to be that. Okay.
The news is brought to you by Capitec. Simplify banking. Live better. Kaya News.
It's 2 o'clock in Joburg, and here are the stories you need to know right now. Leaders are demanding compensation for Marikana mine workers' families, and Mangaung Metro has a new executive mayor. Good afternoon, I'm Ginelu Huma. Political parties say the struggle and pain of Marikana widows can only end when those responsible for their loved ones' killings are held accountable. It's been 9 years since 34 mine workers were killed outside Lonmin during a Wayne dispute protest action. Leaders addressing the commemoration held by AMCU have called on government to speed up the compensation process. One SA movement leader, Musi Maimane, says South Africa is led by government that favors politicians over its people. He says no one has been held accountable for this tragedy because orders on that day came from top government officials.
We must always stand on the side of the marginalized. Our crisis in this country is that we face a deepening level of poverty, and yet nothing seems to be done by this government.
IFP leader Mangosuthu Buthelezi says government needs to act fast to deal with challenges facing these families.
When the plight of our people is confronted with closed ears and closed eyes, the seed of disaster is sown. 9 years after Marikana, we have seen again that the suffering of a people cannot go on forever. The pain of social and economic injustice will always erupt unless we act to change it.
ANC Councillor Mxolisi Sionzana has been elected as the new executive mayor of the Mangaung municipality in the Free State. This was during a special council sitting today. There were 88 councillors present and 87 cast their ballots, with Sionzana winning 57 of those votes. He resigned from his position as speaker last week at the Mangaung legislature. Former Mayor Olim Mamleli was removed in August last year after a no-confidence vote against her. She is accused in the multi-million rand Free State asbestos tender case with suspended ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule.
The South African Medical Association is calling on the Health Professions Council to discipline medical practitioners who spread misinformation about COVID-19 vaccinations. SAMA says there is a growing concern around healthcare workers who share their personal beliefs and opinions on the vaccines. The call comes after a prominent heart surgeon landed herself in trouble for anti-vaccination views. The association says workers who breach their ethical duties put the lives of people in danger. The chairperson of the association, Dr. Angelique Kutsia, says the benefits of the coronavirus vaccine has been scientifically proven.
So therefore, the medical profession and doctors have a duty, as stipulated by the HPCSA, to respect patients as individuals and recognize their inherent worth, not to cause any harm, to regard truth and truthfulness, and to strive to make a positive contribution to society in accordance with our professional abilities and social position.
Zambia's outgoing President Edgar Lungu has congratulated opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema for his victory in the presidential election. Hichilema garnered more than 1 million votes to defeat the incumbent president. Addressing the nation earlier, Lungu has thanked Zambians for trusting him in leading and serving their country. He says while there were several challenges during his tenure, he still believes that they achieved a lot. Lungu has committed to a peaceful transition of power.
Based on the revelation of the ECZ fund results, I will comply with the constitutional provisions for a peaceful transition of power. I would therefore like to congratulate my brother, the President-elect, His Excellency Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, for becoming the 7th Republican President. Countrymen, women and the youth, let me also congratulate all those who participated in this general election.
In your weather for today, it's a fine day in Johannesburg, with temperatures having peaked at highs of 18 degrees, 20 degrees in Tshwane, as well as 19 in Sidibeng. If you missed it, the big story right now, leaders are demanding compensation for Marikana mine workers' families.
Kaya News. On the streets, on the air, and on kaya959.co.za. If you...
So I'm just going to stop it over there. So if we note, one thing to note is obviously there's, and I'm not quite sure. Sorry, I'm gonna just quickly sneeze. Yeah. Sorry. I didn't have time to switch off the mic. Okay. Anyway, I think I'm good now. Right. So, it is obviously the similarities in the stories, which is exactly what I was saying to you about kind of like different, there's different sides, story, different parts, story, and obviously we're looking, and I'm referring to the COVID-related one about the vaccine, etc., etc. Now, it's there is details are different, completely different. Once again, Kaya will take a different angle. Every station should and would take a different angle because 10-1, their journalists, their field reporters have gone to go and find and compile that story for an original, obviously, execution / obviously delivery / presentation / broadcast on the station itself. Right. There was also there was 1 or 2 execution mistakes, but what's to obviously applaud this anchor is that when you make a mistake, you just gather yourself and make it right, and so move along, to say it correctly and move along. The only one thing that is, so just if I had to really just tear it apart, is you can hear that kind of click on the mouse, and that 10-1 was not her. I'm guessing it was the presenter, right? So presenters need to also just sit back and keep quiet, right? Because the thing is that it's not time for them to go and open the door and go and have a drink of water and make all that noise or move around with their chair kind of squeaking or this, or change the positioning of their mic, all that. They must keep quiet, man, because it makes it sound bad. Let's listen to another one.
SABC News, independent and impartial.
It's just gone 3 o'clock in the news this afternoon. The EFF calls for prosecution in the Marikana tragedy and delay in the announcement of a new Northwest Premier.
And in your sport, the Paralympics to be held without spectators, and Pereira has contracted COVID-19 before the South African series. I'll have details at the bottom of the hour.
Our top story this hour, the EFF has called on the National Prosecuting Authority to prosecute President Cyril Ramaphosa following the deaths of miners in Marikana in the Northwest 9 years ago. At the time, Ramaphosa was a non-executive director at Lonmin, the company involved in the labour dispute with workers. Malema says if the NPA fails to take an action, they will act.
We want to call upon the legal representatives to intensify that case to ensure that our people, survivors, and the families of those who are dead are paid both by the state and Cyril Ramaphosa as an individual. And if they are not going to prosecute Ramaphosa, they must issue a non-prosecuting letter as the EFF want to prosecute Ramaphosa.
Meanwhile, a group of close to 100 AMCU members have been chanting slogans and traditional songs at the Kopi at Marikana near Rustenburg in the northwest. They are following the virtual 9th Marikana commemoration on social media platforms. Itumeleng Khajane reports.
They are singing pro-Joseph Matundra and AMCU songs at the Kopi, waiting for the moment to lay wreaths at the Kopi, where 34 of their colleagues were killed by police. It has been tradition that the wreaths should be laid at 3 o'clock in the afternoon during the commemoration.
Let's stay in the northwest, where the highly expected announcement of a new premier has been delayed. The ANC Interim Provincial Committee was expected to make the announcement for the replacement of Premier Job Mokgoro this morning. The IPC has been calling for the removal of Mokgoro, who it accuses of not taking instructions from the party. Patrick Dindwa has more.
It is expected that Mokgoro should first resign as both Premier and a member of the legislature to make way for the Premier-elect, who is currently not a member of the legislature. The party will then update its list of members in the legislature with the IEC.
Let's take you to Cape Town now, where the Athlone Stadium is set to become another mass vaccination site in the Western Cape with drive-through lanes. Provincial authorities say the facility will have 40 vaccination stations operational by the end of August. The site will be able to deliver about 4,000 jabs a day. The Western Cape is currently in the third wave of the pandemic with over 42,000 active cases. And finally, Zambian President Edgar Lungu says he is committed to a peaceful and successful transition of power. Delivering his concession speech, Lungu has also congratulated his successor, Hakainde Hichilema. Lungu says he accepts and respects the Electoral Commission's results.
I will comply with the constitutional provisions for a peaceful transition of power. I would therefore like to congratulate my brother, the President-elect, His Excellency Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, for becoming the 7th Republican President. I would like to thank all those who voted for my party, the Patriotic Front.
Our top story this hour, the EFF has called on the National Prosecuting Authority to prosecute President Cyril Ramaphosa following the deaths of miners in Marikana in the northwest 9 years ago. For Metro FM News, I'm Lindy Sarame. If you're watching the time, it is 4 after 3, and this is the King Suite.
SABC News, independent and impartial.
This is the King Suite on Metro FM.
Hottest team on the turf.
3 to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we cry, but I guess you know now.
Rocking your afternoons daily.
Just like that.
You're welcome to the King Suite with Spectacular and DJ Maves. The King Suite on Metro FM.
I just want to see something. Did I not lose that? Just want to see in a second. Sorry?
President. I would like to thank all those who
Prosecuting Authority to prosecute President Cyril Ramaphosa following the deaths of miners in Marikana in the northwest 9 years ago. For Metro FM News, I'm our top story this hour, the EFF.
all those who voted.
Okay, so this is odd though. I mean, she does know financial indicators. She does know, and maybe this was happened. I've got such a short memory. I'm sorry, not sorry. It's just the way it is, right? But this for me was the best one, and I'm not being a favoritist, but this one was complete. That's what EWN is, where's the weather, man? Where's the traffic, man? Where's the financial indicators? These things are important. And I work at a station that does also, it chooses not to include the weather, it doesn't include traffic, it doesn't also include financial indicators. Sometimes it doesn't even include sport, which is weird. When I say weird, it just doesn't feel right at all because the news is it's a cohesive, holistic product for me, right? And again, it's obviously a personal opinion. I don't. Why would you do it at all if you're not going to do it in its obviously its full form? Anyway, okay, good. I'm saying good examples. However, right? I'm saying they are great to as in terms of like obviously the copy and once again the presentation of it. So let's move on to multi-version news. Right, good newsrooms update stories as new information, as I said to you a little earlier, right? So that we can update different angles and different facts that we can't include necessarily in a single bulletin, right, or a single story. So we retell the story by using, I say, different ways that we approach it, maybe different sound bites, different boxes, etc., etc. Any version of a story written in this particular manner will leave out some details so that we can include it in the other. So each multi-version piece, right, should obviously be able to exist alone. Why? One, obviously, we want any piece on air to be able to stand alone. So whatever link you're doing, and this is also particular, it's a content link, right? Okay, must be able to must be able to stand alone, make sense, have a beginning, middle, and end, right? So who, what, why, when, where, and how. Again, just to kind of relate it back to news. But here's also the biggest thing is that we don't expect the listener to be there for the next bulletin and the next one and the next one and the next one. So it makes absolutely no sense to present part of a story that is incompletely presented. Okay, so the theory of evolution, so adapt or die. People want news and they know how to get it. So you are not the sole provider of news, but you are the trustworthy source of news, right? So we on radio, you as opposed to digital. Let's talk about digital and maybe even print. So where you might find tabloid and you might find opinionated or you might find clickbait or you might find fake news, right? Blah blah blah, etc. etc. I think you know what I mean, right? You won't find that on radio at all, never ever on any station, okay? And if they do that, well, you can take it to the BCCSA. They'll obviously be held accountable, etc. etc. As I say, right? The station is competing with a whole world of news and news sources, and so what do we need to do? We need to keep their attention. We need to keep it short, and we need to obviously keep it relevant, right? In any market, it's not uncommon to find a station that includes advertising on buses, billboards, and if the station can afford it, because it's really expensive, TV. So why do we mention that? Right. Here is a just as a sidebar, because it's kind of out of place, right? We would like to also make sure that I'm just so we want to obviously station attention, right, and awareness, so that we also and we can do this in many other ways now in terms of PR and promotions and activations and social media and so on and so on and so on and so on, right? To make a stand up. We can also get sponsors involved that will sponsor the news, sponsor the traffic, sponsor the weather, sponsor the sports, whatever it may be, right? So again, we can draw attention to a larger focus or a more specific, right? Focus on the news. I want to find other words, but I can't find them right. Right. Okay, so here is another way multi-version can work, right? Your local newsroom can now build on what national networks are sending, right? Right, so let's look at further further facts, right? Theory. For the method, what do we do with this? Okay, everyone figures out his or her own way to do a multi-version. Because you are educated and because you're skilled as a professional, a media professional, a journalist, you should know how to report a story from different angles. Okay, see more. You're not supposed to see inside beyond sight, and you won't get the reference because it's from a cartoon in the 80s. But anyway, Thundercats sidebar, love it. Anyway, so we want to be able to like that particular journalist has gone and done the research, has gone to go find things, whatever it is, and has found that and has decided, should I say, or landed upon the reasoning for being able to include more than one angle, and again, more than one, let's say, I'm going to say just like oh man, a segment, right, with different information that covers the same story. So in the case of a featured story, you can think of a multivision reporting as a miniature soap opera. I think it's a bit dramatic because I don't want you to even have an inkling to try and think of it as dramatic, right? Please. News is to be straightforward, okay? And a soap opera kind of implies drama and sensationalism, whatever it may be, right? Okay. What that actually means is saying like, oh, there's now part one, part two, part three, part four, or whatever it may be, right? Build your audience through the morning and leave them with a cliffhanger to bring them back tomorrow. Again, one of those things with the long running stories makes sense, but a cliffhanger, please, once again, that implies that you have left something out, and they're going to only get the rest of it tomorrow. It's not, so don't interpret it in that way. I would say give them a good product, right? Tell them exactly everything that is available to or should be available to the audience or the public in your news bulletins. And when you do end, they're going to come back to listen to more of what the newsroom has found to be credible, justified, and valuable as presentable to the audience, right? Okay. Sometimes on a on a charge and reaction story, you can create several versions by focusing alternately, oh, my pronunciation, excuse me, let me just say that again. So sometimes, obviously, on a charge and reaction, in other words, like there's a reason to, well, there's obviously an action towards, so people are now honing down on this particular story, and then there's a reaction to it, etc., in terms of cause and effect for the public itself, right? As well as a different kind of like perspective looking at the journalists can also involve a kind of charge and reaction context as well. Anyway, you can create several versions of by focusing alternately on the charge then the denial. So supposedly, just kind of so you don't lose any context on that. They are we want to when we are focusing, let's say, on different angles, right? So let's say a multifaceted or a multi-version story, right? Okay. You should put some context in for people to think about what is also happening around that story, right? So, okay, so in giving them the options to have a choice and perspective, which then obviously includes the way that you are presenting the story with its different focuses, charge and then denial, right? Okay, another multi-version technique that can give you reporting depth and set it apart is to briefly give the meat of your story and then focus on an interesting element. So we could give a human element or a technical element or a governmental element or a statistical element or whatever, right? So let's look at a few multi-versions of a single story about a blizzard in New York, right? City, right? New York State, New York City. The station had already broadcast reports on the traffic tie-ups, interviewed storm experts and city officials, and also reported on electrical outages. In short, all the hard news on the blizzard had already been reported, but because the blizzard was still happening, right, it still is newsworthy because it's affecting the public or the feed area or your listeners, right? Harris's assignment was to continue. So Harris, the reporter, was to continue to cover the story and to get the human angle. Give it a second. I'm going to just zoom in because we're going to look at different versions of this over here. Let me just focus on the first. Okay. All right. So first broadcast was this one over here. Okay. Multiversion number 1. Okay. So it does not use actuality. It actually describes the scene. The Columbus Circle station is a pretty strong argument for placing the rest of the city underground and having New Yorkers evolve into a race of mole people. It's a bit extreme, but anyway, right? It's a bit, yeah. Let me just keep my opinions to myself. Anyway, so you would obviously see this as someone on the field. Agreed, right? So, okay. I mean, it's dirty and you can't understand the announcements, but at least there's no slipping and sliding down here because there's no snow down here. About the only hint of the weather above is that a lot of folks are dressed in clothing usually associated with Arctic, right? Exploration. Nobody looks any more testy or miserable than they usually do. Lee Harris 1010. So 1010 wins right at the Columbus Circle station. Second version 2. So now he wants to go use a quote to make a little bit of. So here's a little Vox piece over here. Well, there's no snow down here in the Columbus Circle station. In fact, there's very little indication of the situation topside at all, other than Arctic Explorer look favored. The Arctic Explorer look favored by many of the commuters this morning, and the above average number of homeless people who have come down to get out of the storm. This 35-year-old woman says she actually likes this kind of weather because it tends to make people more generous and she does need the help. Here's the Vox. I'm off the streets and I'm 8 months pregnant. Wolf is finding me a a place pretty soon. Harris says, "You're 8 months pregnant and you slept on the street last night." I slept on the street. That's right. And she says she slept on the street the last time she was pregnant. 101, 1010 wins at the Columbus Circle station. All right, let's look at another example. Right? Nearly done, don't worry. Right, number 3. Well, on top of everything else, the weather is apparently making a bad impression on some of our foreign visitors. This businessman from Hong Kong just doesn't see the charm in having his flight delayed 36 hours and waiting almost that long to get a cab. The man says, "Well, it's interesting, but it's not very impressive." Harris, I suppose the weather is better in Hong Kong. Man says, "Well, we are having a tropical climate. We're having a tropical climate over in Hong Kong. So hot, wet, wintertime, you're up to like 50 to 60 degrees, right? That's okay if you like being comfortable and that sort of thing." Well, Lee Harris 1010 wins at the cab line at the Sheraton in New York. Let's get the last one. Yeah, one of the one of the reasons subway was put below ground was to make it impervious to days like this. And below ground, it looks like, sorry, let me just not do that, right? I'm trigger happy. And below ground, it looks like just another day, including the usual contingent of people who call the subway home after night. This woman says she's been homeless for 8 years, but weather like this has its advantages. Off to the box, right? Even though it's colder, street people have a tendency to be more friendlier if it's snowing. And if you're homeless, and they do help you out more than they would when the weather is nicer. By the way, that woman claims to be and appears to be 8 months pregnant. Right? If she says so and she looks so, I don't think you should say claims anyway. But anyway, woman. With my last kid, I slept in the street also. Lee Harris, 1010, wins in the Columbus Circle station. You like the way I'm pretending to be like a newscaster. I like it. Anyway. Here's here's our second last slide. Let's continue. So look at this one here. So Cheneve newscast, CBS Spectrum Cheneve. Right, good morning. Here's a CBS News brief. Okay. A monster merger is in the works. It could be the biggest ever. So QBell Atlantic Corporation, Telecommunications Incorporated, and Liberty Media Corporation today announced that they have signed a letter of intent to merge. She's with Bell Atlantic. If approved, the deal would create a $60 billion multimedia giant, number 6 in the Fortune 500. American scientists Russell Hulse and Joseph Taylor of Princeton University have won the Nobel Prize in Physics. This for their work on the study of pulsars and Einstein's theories, relatively speaking. I don't think you should actually include that kind of like coy talk. Because obviously, theory of Einstein's theory of relativity. I don't know. That's a bit cringeworthy, but okay. Anyway, Toronto has won the American League pennant, beating Chicago last night to win the series in 6 games. Fire officials in Austin, Texas, say 3 recent fires were set by kids who say they got the idea from MTV's Beavis and Butthead cartoon. And the mayor of New Haven, trying to smooth down here, Connecticut, says it felt like a bee sting, but it was a bullet that hit him in the leg. Police say it went through the 2 steel doors and a wall before it went through. Let me just say this, please, again. Okay, let's clear my mouth here. The mayor of New Haven, Connecticut, says it felt like a bee sting, but it was a bullet that hit him in the leg. Police say it went through 2 steel doors and a wall before it bounced off Mayor LeSueur's legs. Like he's okay. From CBS. No, he didn't say like there. From CBS News, I'm Jim Chenevey. All right, let's look at another one here. Let's look at the difference and the update. Okay, at 7:30. Good morning. Here's a CBS News brief. Bell Atlantic has announced news brief, please. This is why we're getting the headliners, okay? All right, so here's a news brief. Bell Atlantic has announced a major merger. It plans to buy cable giant Telecommunications Incorporated and its Liberty Media subsidiary. Russell Hulse and Joseph Taylor, both of Princeton University, have won the 1993 Nobel Physics Prize for their studies on Einstein's theories. Some students at Oakland University in suburban Detroit are upset about not being informed that a lab they were using was also home to AIDS research using a live virus. Right. It's not Q, right? Here we go. And this is obviously the soundbar. Right. We have absolutely no indication that any of these students were exposed forever. However, we are discussing this matter with the students to alleviate their concerns. Schools David Desen. No, it's Desen. So that's obviously the soundbite, right? Same with the other side. So rats are nothing new to ships, but this ship is the Space Shuttle to Columbia. Sorry, the Space Shuttle Columbia. 48 rats are now on board the orbiter, preparing for tomorrow's scheduled launch. Deputies in Citrus County, Florida, were chasing Daniel Bennock, wanted on a probation violation, when Bennock jumped into a lake and tried to swim to freedom. That was until he saw a 7-foot alligator floating nearby. He's now in jail. Glad to be there. From CBS News, I'm Jim Chenevey. Right, here we go for the third version. And the lost slide at 8 a.m. How does it change, right? So please note, while we're going through this, you can see the updated stories, obviously, and the different copy, but also now we have new stories because they are coming in. And so the bulletin now is mutating and obviously mutating to be more relevant to that particular time slot, right? That time update, right? Okay, good morning. Here's a CBS News brief. Somali warlord Mohammed Farah Adid Farah. Is it Farah? Farah. I should go and obviously check that out. So let's start that again. Somali warlord Mohammed Farah Adid has today vowed to release captured U.S. pilot Michael Durant. Also, you have to check that out. And a Nigerian peacekeeper. Adid says the 2 hostages will be released today or tomorrow. The Philadelphia Phillies will take on Toronto. Nope, let me start that again. The Philadelphia Phillies will take on Toronto's Blue Jays in the World Series beginning Saturday night. The Phillies beating the Braves 6-3 last night to win the National League pennant. Phillies manager Jim Fregosi, it's obviously Italian, right? Right, okay. Says, obviously, the soundbite. Here we go. I guess we're going to be the underdogs again. It's not a bad way to go. The space shuttle's fueled, and so far all systems are go for the launch later this morning. Right, sorry, let me just go down here. This is weird. Okay, because here it doesn't make sense to this. Okay, but anyway, let's move on. The Right Aid and Revco drugstore chains are expected to announce today they're suing several drug makers for alleged price fixing. Quite a scene during a radio debate featuring Nilo Yuri, a candidate for mayor of Hialeah, I think that's right, Hialeah, Florida, and suspended incumbent mayor Raul Martinet. Yeah, Martine. Oh, maybe that's it. Anyway, okay, let me shut up with the pronunciation. Obviously, I need to go look it up, right, as you should do too. Yuri claims, sorry, that during the debate, Martine stood up and spat at him. Martine says that he was just blowing. A third candidate, Salvatore D'Angelo, says it was very embarrassing. Politics, right? Sorry, there we go. From CBS News, I'm Jim Chenevey. Okay, let's go here. I just want to just move that along. Okay, so filling it all in. If you have all written news for broadcast, well, you have so much more. So you know how much harder it is to write short. It's very. I wouldn't say it's easier. That's a bit of a defamation of journalism, right? But you have a lot more playroom, right? There's a larger play area within, let's say, print. So print or digital, right? Where you can explain a lot of the story. There's a lot of details you can include in, but not here, right? So the art is not only what you put into each story, but also what you leave out. The art of this craft is deciding what gets left on the cutting room floor. So, in other words, to be used in another version while sitting still and giving enough information so that the audience understands what happened, right? The best way to illustrate this is to actually show your scripts that show, this doesn't make any sense, show the script hat that he read over the course of one morning. I don't even get that, so I'm going to just sidebar, delete that. Okay. All right. Okay, so there's the multiple choice. Right, which one of the following news techniques would not be used in a series of multi-version news stories? One is changing locations. Two, switching reporters. C, recording the same lead. D, recording different net sound. Right. Two, the multi-version news methodology evolved in America because a CNN headline news started. This obviously must please go look at these for your text in your textbook, right? The FCC mandated it during the deregulation era. Audiences demanded news market options encourage radio stations to adapt it. These are hard questions, right? European broadcasters are interested in American-style multi-version reporting since competition for news listeners has increased. Commercial radio eliminated public radio in Europe. That's a bit weird and silly. European audiences prefer boring news. European countries have less news than America. Okay, anyway, I'm not going to say anything. True or false? Multi-version news eliminates the need to cover the who, what, why, when, where, and how in each piece. Multi-version news writing is flexible enough for each reporter to discover their own way of creating news stories. Short answer, please. Read the following news story. Insert a story of your choice over here. Identify at least choose a number of whatever news techniques that could be changed to create a multi-version news story. So please go find a news story and go and recreate it in a multi-news version. Right. That's it. I'm going to stop over there. Yeah, I'd say that. So that other point was just random. Stop the share over here. And I'll see you in the next lesson.